we need to talk about something that's been bothering us for a while now. And it's kind of meta coming from us, but here we are.
Yeah, we're literally a review channel about to tell people not to trust review channels, including us, which is wild when you think about it.
Right. So let's just lay it all out. We've been thinking about this a lot lately, like really digging into how the board game review ecosystem actually works. And it's not great.
It's honestly worse than people probably think, because it's not this big conspiracy, you know? It's worse because it's just how the system naturally evolved and nobody really talks about it.
So here's the thing, the board game review world has basically created this situation where reviewers depend on publishers for access and publishers depend on reviewers for credibility. It's like this weird symbiotic relationship that nobody's really supposed to acknowledge.
And the result is that reviews are just softer than they probably should be. Like, we did some digging, and according to a Stonemaier Games research, about 48% of reviewers are at least somewhat worried that posting negative reviews might result in fewer games from publishers. That's not paranoia. That's rational economic calculation. And on the publisher side, roughly half of them report that they commonly don't send future games to reviewers who gave them negative reviews. So the worry isn't unfounded.
So you've got reviewers worried about repercussions, 48% of them, including 4% who are very worried. And then you've got publishers basically confirming that those fears are justified. And the worst part is, it's not even explicit. Nobody's saying, don't give negative reviews or we'll punish you. The system just works that way naturally.
Right. So imagine you spend 8 hours, and I mean 8 hours, learning a game's rules, filming multiple playthroughs, editing footage, writing scripts, recording voiceover. You're emotionally invested now. The designer sent you a nice note thanking you. Maybe you interacted with them on social media. And now you've got to decide, do I tell people this game is mediocre?
Option 1 is you make a brutal video about why this $65 game is a waste of money, you crush someone's creative dreams on camera, you probably lose access to their future releases and their publisher's catalog. Option 2 is you find what's good about it. Highlight one interesting mechanic, frame it as not for everyone, keep the relationship warm. See how option 2 just makes more sense economically?
Almost everyone chooses option 2, that's the thing. And it's not that reviewers are dishonest, it's just that the economic incentive structures create this constant pressure toward enthusiasm that reviewers don't always recognize they're experiencing.
But here's where it gets really interesting to us, because Stonemaier Games also surveyed about 300 reviewers, and the data shows something wild. 96% of reviewers receive at least some free games from publishers. That's basically universal. But then 90% disclose it, which means there are reviewers out there, not a ton, but some, who are just not telling people they got free copies.
Yeah, and even when people disclose it, that disclosure itself becomes this weird trust-building tool. Like, if you say, this game was given to me free by the publisher, people in the comments will be like, at least they're honest. But the honesty doesn't actually eliminate the bias. You're still unconsciously more favorable towards something someone paid for you to promote.
Exactly. It's like transparency became a marketing tactic. Look how honest we are about our conflict of interest, when really the conflict of interest is still there. You just named it. The bias didn't go away. It's like saying, I know I'm biased, doesn't actually make you unbiased.
And then you've got the FTC dimension, which is honestly kind of wild. In July 2023, the FTC literally issued warnings to board game reviewers and publishers for failing to properly disclose when they receive free games. This was explicit regulatory guidance saying you need to tell people clearly and upfront.
And basically nothing changed afterward. The FTC can't police thousands of YouTube channels, so enforcement is basically non-existent. And even when people do disclose, the disclosure ends up reinforcing trust, paradoxically, because audiences assume reviewers wouldn't sponsor something they didn't genuinely like.
Right. So the system keeps working the way it was working, but here's where it actually gets darker, because we found cases of reviewers who were being paid, like actual money, for guaranteed coverage. Industry reports suggest these content partnership packages can run anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000. And they definitely included positive coverage. And when confronted about it, reviewers would say, I'm paid for my time and expertise, not for the review specifically. The line between those two things is basically invisible.
Which is lawyer-thin reasoning. Because if you're being paid by a publisher to create content about their game, you're obviously going to be positive about it. That's not rocket science. And the crazy part is the Stonemaier Games data showed only 2% of reviewers request money for reviews many times. So 98% claim they don't do it.
But the system still behaves like money is flowing because the economic incentives don't need explicit payment. They're baked into access. Publishers send games to positive reviewers. Positive reviewers get more views. More views mean growth. Negative reviewers lose access. It all cascades without anyone needing to shake hands under the table.
And then there's the algorithm layer on top of that, which is honestly the thing that disturbs us the most because it's so invisible. YouTube's algorithm doesn't reward accuracy the way it rewards engagement, watch time, and click-through rates. That mathematically incentivizes reviewers to be more confident than they actually feel, to use more dramatic language, to make quicker judgments, to focus on games that already have hype because those are safe bets.
Yeah, a review that says this game has some great moments but serious pacing issues gets way fewer views than this game is surprisingly great. The algorithm doesn't reward balance, it rewards engagement.
And it's subtle, right? Nobody's saying you have to hype things, you just notice over time that balanced reviews underperform. Negative titles get fewer clicks initially, and YouTube's algorithm learns this and deprioritizes them. So you start framing things differently. You start using words like surprisingly that create lower expectations so you can hit people with positive surprise.
That phrase alone tells you something, because it implies the reviewer went in with low expectations. But a lot of the time, they didn't. They just needed to make the video more engaging. The framing is a marketing decision disguised as authenticity.
And here's the thing that really gets us. Harsh critics don't survive in this ecosystem. They're reviewers who built reputations for being genuinely critical, and they basically get destroyed for it. Publishers stop sending them games, audiences hate them because comments fill with, "This reviewer hates everything." The algorithm learns that their videos underperform. More positive competitors get newer games first, get featured on Kickstarter pages, build bigger audiences.
So the system naturally selects for positivity, not accuracy. The people who should exist, the genuinely critical voices that keep an industry honest, just get ground out. And what survives are reviewers who learned to work within the system, who mention downsides but frame them as not for everyone, who've internalized the constraints so deeply that the constraints don't feel like constraints anymore.
They genuinely believe they're being objective when they're actually just perfectly calibrated to the system's incentives. We might be too, which is why we wanted to do this episode, because we can't fully escape it. We probably have unconscious biases.
Yeah, and here's the thing about Kickstarter campaigns specifically, because that's where it gets really visible. We found examples of designers who strategically target reviewers based on past coverage, like they've literally tracked which channels were most positive previously, and then send early copies only to the ones they know will be enthusiastic. Because a review from a 50,000 subscriber channel can literally move thousands of units on Kickstarter if it lands at the right time.
Right, and they're not being evil about it, they're being smart. Why would you give your game to a reviewer known for skepticism? It doesn't make business sense. So designers learn to approach certain reviewers because they're reliable. And reliable doesn't mean accurate. It means they're unlikely to post something scathing.
There's this whole unspoken language. Publishers talk about reviewers who get it, which really translates to understand the vision and won't trash it publicly. And if you speak that language, you get early copies. If you don't, you get the game 3 weeks after launch, when views have already peaked and you're behind your competitors.
But it's not manipulation in the explicit sense. It's just selection bias at scale. And the board game industry has actually had some really instructive scandals that show how little accountability exists at any level, which makes you think about what else is invisible, you know?
Yeah, like the Golden Bell situation, which is genuinely wild. This company, Golden Bell Studios, started signing contracts with game designers to handle production and distribution. And what actually happened was absolutely chaotic. They delayed games for years, like Kickstarter campaigns that funded in 2018 didn't reach international backers until 2023 or 2024.
5 years. Some people were waiting 5 years for their games. Meanwhile, the game was already on retail shelves months after the Kickstarter end date.
so backers were literally the last to get their copies after paying first. And then the company tried shipping games via USPS media mail, which is only supposed to be for books and recordings to cut costs.
And when postal workers caught this, some backers got charged postage due. The company tried to justify it by including a printed comic and a musical score, which doesn't actually qualify games for media mail under USPS rules. So they basically committed postal fraud and then didn't take responsibility for it.
But the designers, the actual creators whose work Golden Bell was supposed to be distributing, they got absolutely destroyed by this. Contracts gave complete ownership of IP to Golden Bell. Deadlines moved without explanation. When designers tried to exit, they got threatened with lawsuits. One designer lost literally months or years of unpaid work on projects that never materialized.
And the CEO, Mark Goldner, became infamous for casually threatening litigation. There was this whole mess with a game called The Recipe Game, where the designer sued on People's Court, won, got her rights back, and then Goldner appealed and got the decision overturned. It's still tied up in litigation.
And the wild part is, the company eventually got banned from Board Game Geek and Kickstarter, but they're still operating in the hobby. They just can't use the platforms where they built their audience. So if a publisher can delay fulfillment for years, commit postal fraud, take ownership of creators' IP, threaten litigation, and get banned from major platforms, what's stopping them from subtly bribing reviewers?
Nothing, really. Except reviewers often don't need to be bribed because the system incentivizes positivity naturally. And that's almost scarier because it means the corruption is structural, not personal. Nobody's being evil. The system is just designed in a way that pushes everybody toward the same outcome.
Here's what we actually want you to do. If you're going to watch reviews, ours or anyone else's, come in skeptical. Assume reviewers have been shaped by incentives they don't fully recognize. Cross-reference with other sources. Try the games yourself with your actual friend group. Your table is the ground truth, not the review.
And look for reviewers whose tastes differ from yours. Because once you understand how someone's biases work, you can actually calibrate for them. You can't calibrate for biases you can't see. Pay attention to how reviewers discuss negatives. Are they burying them, softening them, or are they clear and direct? That tells you something over time.
Support reviewers who prioritize independence over growth. Some of the most honest voices in board gaming are slightly behind the curve because they buy their own copies or accept fewer review games. They're slower, but they're honest. And be suspicious of perfect review collections, where a channel has reviewed 100 games and given almost everything an 8 or higher.
That's not an accurate representation of the hobby. That's the highlight reel. You want to find reviewers who are willing to say, this game isn't good, and not just, this game isn't for me. That distinction matters enormously because one is a verdict and one is just personal preference masquerading as a verdict.
Look, the board game industry is genuinely better because reviews exist. We wouldn't have this conversation without them, but it's probably worse in a lot of ways than it would be if reviews weren't so systematically biased toward positivity. We're all kind of complicit in a system we didn't entirely choose, and that's worth acknowledging.
So yeah, don't trust us. Don't trust any single review channel. Look at patterns, compare opinions, play the games. And remember that behind every reviewer is a human being trying to make a living in a system that mathematically rewards enthusiasm more than accuracy. That doesn't make reviews worthless, but it does change how you should treat them.
Thanks for hanging with us while we got uncomfortably honest about how all this actually works. We know it's weird to hear this from a review channel, but we think it matters.
Yeah, we're Board Game Critique, and we'll see you in the next one. And hey, thanks for being skeptical. Seriously.